Someone who is not getting a good rating, at least not from Ja Morant, is Taylor Jenkins. I want to get into this conversation. He got fired from the Grizzlies, who were in third place and had a really good record. They're considered a Western Conference contender. It was kind of a shocking, probably would have been the most shocking thing of this.
The vote on the tush push has been tabled.
Boo.
Back to you.
So this probably would have been the most shocking thing in the NBA season if it wasn't for the fact that Luka got traded. But, like, having Taylor Jenkins, a winning coach on a team that seems to be headed in the right direction, and a respected X and O's coach be fired by his team just before the playoffs, I think 15 games out of the playoffs while they're playing well in third place, blew my mind. I think some reporting has come out since.
Yeah, so the background on this is they cleared house of their assistant coaches this offseason, and the new offense ran fewer ball screens, and Ja Morant in this system was not happy with his fewest touches, fewest points, fewest shot attempts per game in several years. He's also a considerably worse player than he was 3 years ago, shooting the ball significantly worse, and it creates a really interesting situation. You have a good coach, you have Ja Morant, who, regardless of how absurd the NBA suspension and over the top was for his off-the-court stuff a couple years ago, he is still an unstable superstar because he doesn't play and he's not a consistent scorer because he can't shoot the basketball. He hasn't been consistent in the postseason. You guys, is it right in the NBA superstar culture to let that guy in that city change that coach?
Yeah, the reporting is that he's out because Ja didn't like the changes to the
It's
offense.
implied. Yeah. It's not explicitly said, but the implication is that he wasn't happy with his role in the new offense.
They're trying to figure out the reasons why. That's not the reason why Ja's not Ja, man. You got to let that bird free, man. You got to let him. You got to give him a weekend. That's Dennis Rod. You got to give him a weekend in South Beach, man. I wanted to ask Steve Williams that about Tiger. Like, you got to let them do what they do, man. That's just...
Steve Williams looked us straight in the eye and said, Tiger had no off-field distraction.
That's great. I didn't want to say it. That's why I wanted to give grace to Neek, man, because we got to, if we're going to take accountability, which Steve went on record, he is not for. He is not for workplace accountability. I'm like, okay, we're just breezing over everything at this point.
The idea of the superstar in the NBA having enough power to fire a coach is not new. It doesn't bother me that Taylor Jenkins got run because the superstar wanted him out. I don't know that banking on that superstar, and I think this is what you're alluding to, Charlie, is that Ja Morant is not a reliable superstar and he's not the level of superstar that you want to give this power to, but he's the guy in that city. And it just speaks to me about being a head coach in basketball or being anyone in the basketball organization. I ran into this argument oftentimes when people want to be critical of teams that were constructed around LeBron and say, well, don't blame the GM because LeBron's actually the GM. Maybe he is, but your job as the GM is to convince LeBron. You know, like you would have thought that at one point your job is to build a roster, but now your job has gotten a little harder when there's someone in your organization who has as much power and influence as a superstar player. Your job now becomes to sell LeBron, convince LeBron it was his idea, or figure out a way. And I feel the same way about this offense with Taylor Jenkins. Mm-hmm. And so, like, if Taylor gets fired because Ja's not happy, maybe you wish Ja would have handled this differently.
Yeah.
But ultimately, as a head coach, when you're head coach of an NBA team and you guys have a superstar, I'm not saying you have to kowtow to the superstar, but you have to take into account that whatever you're doing, the first person, and maybe the only person whose buy-in you have to get off the top is the superstar, and it doesn't matter how good your idea is. Like, I don't give a how innovative your offense is. Yeah. If you ain't convinced him that is innovative and it's going to help you out, then you lost.
It's age-old problem in sports where you think the title puts you in charge, or you think the talent sometimes puts you in charge. When I was playing receiver in the league and I had other receivers, and they were like, man, you're so happy being the fourth. I'm like, I'm not happy being the fourth receiver, bro. I know what I make. Yeah. Like, this is the most I can be looking at the contracts. And you arguing for touches as an undrafted free agent on special teams, that ain't how this works, my boy. Yeah. You got to follow the money trail. So even looking at Coach Jenkins and what you make a year versus what Ja makes a year, it is not more important for what your strategy is. It only fits in that way of how it pertains to the main investment, which is Ja Morant. And also, you might not have even done anything from your perspective, the warrant being fired or whatever. But from an organizational standpoint, we've invested this into Ja Morant. Even if it is like, hey, maybe this doesn't work out. Maybe he'll never be the same player. We got to remove some of the factors to see if that's the case. And I'm okay with moving away $3 to $5 million a year to save the $50 million a year that I'm giving this player.
And the NBA superstar is the NFL quarterback, in that you can't win without one. And even if Ja is not the perfect one, he's the closest thing you got to it. And there are lots of teams that are looking for somebody like that. So you thinking that you can, and I'm not suggesting that Taylor Jenkins is like, man, I don't need to convince Ja. I'll figure this out. But ultimately, whether he's doing that consciously or not having him believe in his plan is essentially doing that. And the point that you made about being the number 4 receiver, and they say you show up to practice happy even though you're not getting no balls, I can't afford not to be. I cannot. Yeah, I'm in no position to come in here and try to wave it around and tell people what I am and am not going to do, although I'm not returning no punts. I don't care what you say.
Me neither. I'm on record saying I'm not returning. I've told head coaches, hey, no, you go back there and return it.